All right, moving on from Photoshop to cinema. Um, I'll introduce a plane. Now, plane objects are square by default. So this is actually very convenient because we made our texture map square. So we don't have to scale the texture to have the right proportions. Now, what I need to do is, first of all, create a new material and create a floor object and create a light and move that light above the plane object. Now you can tell that I've actually moved the plane up a little bit, and let's give the light some shadow. Let's just do soft, and if I test render this, you get a big huge black shadow. Obviously it's not that pretty, but we're going to change that in a minute. First of all, we have to open the material, call it flywing, and you can tell that it already has color and reflectance, so that's the highlight. And I'm just going to go to the default specular, and let's see, let's put down the fall off, and let's make this a very heavy highlight. Take off the fall off a little bit, can even make it broader. So this is a pretty thick highlight. Now, let's go get our texture. So I went to color, go to texture, load image. I can go to my default project, go to texture map, and go to flywing. Now you'll notice that it will pick up without any error messages. If you have an error message, that means that you don't have your textures in the proper directory. It will see those directories under preferences. You go down to files, and here you have all these directories that you can input yourself. These are directories, not textures themselves, but you can tell, see, all these directories are called texts. They're in different projects, and Cinema 4D needs to know where to find these textures. So that's a good thing to just put that in there, because you're going to mess up if you don't. Right, so we got the color channel. Let's stick this on the plane object. It's already properly positioned, and I get something like this. It looks awful. Now, first of all, let's start with the alpha. I switch on the alpha, and I load a texture. It's a separate texture, so I have to load it again, and it's fly mask. Now you will notice that the wing itself is white, and the background is black. Make sure it's black, because if it's a shade of gray, then it doesn't really work. You will still see the rectangle around it. Now if I render it, I get this really broad shadow because the light is pretty close to the fly wing, but you can tell this is pretty good because it already separates the wing from the rest of the square. Now, let's add some effects. For instance, transparency, and we'll go to texture again, but this time, because I've already loaded the textures, I can go to bitmaps and just pick it up where I left it off in color and just pick up flywing. What I get now is something like this. Already looks pretty good. So that's the transparency. Now, moving on, let's add some realism, sort of. Let's go to the bump map, and we'll put in the same thing, the flywing again. Now it's the same image, but the information is used in a different way. Now I'm just going to pump this up to a ridiculous 300% and see what it does then. And it gets this realism to it because now the specular is a little bit broken up by the bump. I've exaggerated it, but this is actually pretty good at this scale. There's so many things you can do. Let's try a couple of things out because there's so many special effects that you can do with simply adding special effects filters in Cinema 4D. Let's go to the transparency, and between this texture and the actual output of the transparency, I'll put in a colorizer filter. Now this won't get rid of the original texture, flywing, but it will actually remap the color gradient of this image into something from yellow to red to black. Now you can move around these colors, change the colors themselves. Let's put this in at, well, let's make this like a light blue, and this one a little bit more towards the blue, less turquoise, and this can stay in the red, I guess. It doesn't really matter because it's not going to be transparent. Let's make this black. Right, so now it's like this, minty green to blue to black. Let's render this. Nothing much happens to the wing itself, but the shadow is all of a sudden colored in. Now we can actually go to color, do exactly the same thing, just slightly different. Put a colorizer in. Let's make this more purplish, and this more on the pinky side, like this, and keep this black. Maybe move this up a little bit. Now let's see what it does. See, already you can see in the preview that it's changing the color of the wing itself, but the transparency is a different channel, so that's why the color comes out different. Now what you notice is that when something is white in the transparency channel, it becomes transparent like glass, but in the alpha channel it becomes completely opaque. So the wing was white and the background was black. So an alpha channel and a transparency map are actually quite the reverse. The only big difference is that an alpha channel is a hole and not a transparency. So for instance, the specular won't bleed out onto the rest of the square because there is an alpha channel. And the alpha will actually cut away the excess material of the surface. Now, what else? Oh yeah, this one other thing, an alpha channel is always black and white. You can put in a color image, but it will actually turn it over into a grayscale image. So you can do whatever you want, but it's best to put in a grayscale image in the first place. And that's why I didn't put, that's why I made the 2 JPEGs instead of just using one, or a PSD. It's just a little bit big. Now a bump map will also use the grayscale image. Reflectance, here we can actually joke around with this. Let's see, let's put the image back in, and let's say we put a colorizer in as well. Colorize it, and this time I'll put white on the black part of the wing and make it, I don't know, yeah, like a pinky red. Let's move this up a little bit. Now what happens? If I render it now, and there's not much difference, but that's because the color and the reflectance are added. But what happens is that the highlight is colored in, and you can tell that the black parts, where it picks up the highlight, is actually white. Let's just do one more thing. Put in the colorizer. Let's take out these colors and just put in white. And now I should get, it's bleaching out a little bit. Let's see if we can pump this up a little bit. Colorizer. Let's turn this all to gray and go back to the reflectance. Let's pump this up and then see what it does. Now you get this pinky shine over the wing. You can play around with this endlessly, and it works really well. The main thing that you need to do is experiment, change one thing, test render it, and see what it does. And if something happens that you can't explain, try to work your way back.